好啊，各位傳媒
Friends of the media, the purpose of this briefing today is to bring you up to date on the work of the Legislative Council meetings in this session, and thereafter I'll take questions from the floor. In the 2016-17 session, LegCo held a total of 33 meetings, including 3 chief executives' question and answer sessions, which took 407 hours in total. In terms of quorum calls, the number of quorum calls made by members during the council meetings in this session total 95, consuming more than 16 hours, and 2 council meetings were adjourned due to the lack of quorum. During this session, the administration introduced a total of 29 bills. The council passed 12, 7 of which were passed with amendments and 5 without. And the longest time it took was 71 hours, and that was the Appropriation Bill 2017. The scrutiny of the remaining 17 bills will continue in the next session. 21 members submitted a total of 767 CSAs on 4 government bills, 208 of which were admitted. 1 member's bill was introduced and passed with amendments. During this session, the administration tabled a total of 174 items of subsidiary legislation subject to negative vetting procedure, of which 156 were passed without amendment and 2 with amendments by the administration. 4 members proposed amendments to 2 of the 174 items of subsidiary legislation, but were all negatived. The scrutiny of the remaining 18 items will continue in the next session. In addition, a total of 12 motions moved by the administration to approve or amend subsidiary legislation subject to positive vetting were all passed. A member proposed 2 amendments to one of these motions, which were both negatived. Besides, the administration moved 1 motion relating to the appointment of judges of the Hong Kong Court of Final Appeal, which was passed. Members' motions. In this session, members moved 2 motions to amend the rules of procedure. Both were passed. 2 motions seeking to invoke the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance Cap 382 to confer powers on the Council. Both were negatived. 2 motions to censure members for misbehavior under Rule 49B 1A of ROP, and 1 motion to charge the Chief Executive with serious breach of law and or dereliction of duty under Article 73(9) of the Basic Law, which was negatived. In this session, members debated a total of 30 members' motions not intended to have legislative effect. Among them, 4 were passed without amendment and 16 with amendments, and 10 were negatived. Another 2 motions will be debated in the next session, given the end of this session. A total of 3 petitions were presented to the Council under Rule 21 of ROP, 2 of which stood referred to the select committees. The Council on 3 occasions granted special leave of the Council under Section 7 of Cap 382 and Rule 90 of ROP to give evidence of Council proceedings. Members asked a total of 114 oral questions and 584 supplementary questions. Another 447 questions seeking written replies by the government were asked by members. The President issued a total of 46 written rulings. In total, 32 of which were on urgent questions. Of the remaining 14, 2 were related to matters on oath-taking by members, and the others were mainly related to amendments to bills, subsidiary legislation, motions to adjourn the Council, and procedural matters. So much I have to bring you up to date on. TVB DY. In this session, the administration filed a writ to unseat members, and that there's going to be a verdict this afternoon regarding 4 members. Now, for these disqualification procedure by the administration, do you think that this is one of the most biggest challenges to the relationship between the executive and the legislature? And as a result of the verdict, what action will be undertaken by the Secretariat? Well, this is not something that I, as President, would like to see happen, but the administration is acting in accordance with the laws in Hong Kong and file the proceedings in court. We have to respect the court's decision. This afternoon at 3 p.m., a verdict will be handed down. We have to study all the court documents before we can make a response. We cannot surmise what the outcome is going to be. President, in this new term of administration, the relationship between the executive and the legislature has become better. Why? What makes the relationship better and more moderate? What difference have you seen? And there will be controversial issues like the co-location of immigration facilities. Do you think that this would bode ill for the relationship between the 2 branches in future? Well, we have a new administration in. The new chief executive has a different chemistry with members, and the new chief executive has been in the government for so long, and she has a mechanism to interact with members all along. And once she was elected, she took the first opportunity to appear in the Council and stated her ideas, and it was a respect for the Council, and she showed this by action, and I mean it was really good so far. As I said, members should take this opportunity. The relationship between the 2 branches is like 2 hands, and we have our respective roles, and we are keeping each other in checks and balances. And long may these kind of ties continue into the future. Of course, the members have their own respective roles, and the administration has its own role, and we don't see eye to eye all the time. Sometimes things are more difficult, sometimes less difficult. If the administration can sufficiently explain the rationale regarding legislation, we may have diverse views. However, there is a chance of them being passed if we can be rational in our debate. President, Commercial Radio, Chen Yik-fai, you made some rulings that made the pro-establishment camp and the Pandams unhappy, like urgent questions. They were never approved. Now, President, you said that because of the constraint of the ROP, they were rejected. Now, I'd like to hear from you, Mr. President, that do you think that the ROP should be amended in a way that you can meet the public aspirations? The other question is about the disqualification of members. If there are members who are unseated here, will that have any impact on the voting result? Are you going to be asking them to return the operating expenses? Let me take your second question first. I said that members are being disqualified. I don't like to see this happen, but we have to respect the court's decision. We have to await the court's decision before we can talk about what we're going to do next. I won't jump to the next step in this regard. Your first question is about my rulings.
At different occasions, I spoke that I play a very lonely role in being the president, and my ruling may not be accepted by all members, but my ruling was made based on the basic law and also the power conferred to me by the rules of procedure, this book, and I can only act in accordance with the rules of procedure. I play a lonely role here as president, and my ruling may not be supported by all, but I have a very good team here, the LegCo Secretariat here, and they always provide me with piles of information of past presidents, and I have a legal advisor who helped me to explain the rationale and all that. So I have to be making my rulings based on the rules of procedure and not my own preferences. I may act in a way coldly, so to speak, but I have to go by the rules of procedures in whatever rulings I make. I hope that members from different political factions can understand the difficulties that I face. And sometimes I agree to requests made by democratic members, and sometimes I disagree with requests made by pro-establishment members, so I go by the rules of procedure. Now the situation is like this. While the reality today is different from the time when the rules of procedures were first drawn up. So that's why we have this Rule of Procedures Committee, which will be looking at requests by members and see if revisions of the ROP are needed. And these have to be decided finally upon by the full council. Sorry, the speaker's not coming through. 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 Well, the first thing that I would like to say about regarding my work performance, I hope that the media can pass a fair comments on my performance, and if there is anything which I failed to do, please remind me, and I can make improvements accordingly. Some members would like to have a debate on certain issues, and we would look at this. The Legislative Council is not the only platform for members to have a debate on issues. They have different avenues to do that. Now, on this past Tuesday, members raised a petition, and I agreed to it, and that was on Mr. Liu Xiaobo. And I have to act in accordance with this red booklet ROP, and I have also the legal advisor, the secretariat, which are providing advice to me. So I agree to the petition in relation to Mr. Liu Xiaobo, and on Wednesday, the first thing in the morning, that petition was presented. And if you want to invoke 16(2), then I have to look at the ROP, and I have to be satisfied that the request is in line with the rule of procedure before I make an approval. So we adjourned the meeting 2 times to deal with the matter, and that lasted for over 70 minutes. And I tried to handle the issues properly, and I try to come up with a proper decision. It's not the case that whatever is requested by the opposition camp, I'm going to disagree with it. No, that's not the case. I would try to do my best to accommodate everyone's request, but still I have to be complying with the real ROP in whatever I do. I will not be making decisions based on my own preference. Cable TV 10. Now, this afternoon, there was the verdict coming from the court, and you said that the decision is still pending, and then you will not comment on how the Secretariat will take things forward. Now, at this juncture, if members are really disqualified, do you need to convene a meeting of the LegCo Commission to talk about how you will follow things up? And would it be like what you did last time? You will be allowing the members a few days to pack up their own stuffs and materials. And also for your decision or ruling on the German debate on Mr. Liu Xiaobo, the members said that it was a matter of urgency. But then Mr. Liu Xiaobo passed away yesterday. Well, looking back, do you think you really have to make a different ruling with the benefit of hindsight? Regarding the disqualification of members, we really have to look at the verdict in the afternoon before we make a decision on what to do. Because there will be a lot of guidelines or guidance coming up from the verdict, which will help us in deciding on the way forward. And if there is a need, maybe I can meet the media in the afternoon to talk about how we follow things up. A ruling was made depending on the circumstances at the time, and the ruling is also made in accordance with the rules of procedure. I think the ruling I made on that occasion you mentioned was a correct one. Of course, every member believes that the request he or she makes is a matter of urgency and meets with the ROP. So yesterday, some other members also raised some other motions, which he said should be dealt with urgently. But I'm constrained by the ROP in whatever I do. The ROP and the basic law stipulate that the president has discretion to decide on the agenda items. But then for Rule 18, it sets out the powers I have. I don't really have that much discretion. Members, of course, are very concerned about the issues they close to their heart. But when it comes to me, my decision, then I have to act in accordance with the ROP.
Hours spent on quorum call were justified, or do you think they have been a major obstruction to LegCo's work?
Can you repeat?
Do you think the 16 hours spent on making quorum calls have been justified, or do you think it's been a major obstacle to LegCo's work? And would you consider amending the rules of procedure to prevent similar tactics from being used? And also, you yourself have faced a lot of criticisms in relation to the rulings you've made, especially in terms of motions moved in relation to Liu Xiaobo. How would you defend yourself in the face of such criticism? And as LegCo's president, how would you contribute to the improvement of the executives and legislature's relationship in future? Thank you.
Well, you asked 3 questions. First of all, quorum call, I think this is according to basic law and rules of procedure. A lot of members would like to change it, but unfortunately it is enshrined in basic law. So this is something that nothing much can be done. It's the privilege of individual members if they decided they should ask for quorum call. So I respect the privilege to do so. As president of LegCo, I need to respect, their rights. So that is the first part of the answer. Your third question about my rulings on members' call for motion, as I have answered already, my rulings, all my rulings, I have to do according to this. There's no personal feelings on that. Everything must be made according to the rules of procedure. In doing that, making any rules, I have, the secretariat and also legal advisor giving me professional advice. And also we dig up all the previous rulings, and from there I make my rulings. So this is something that I, as president, have to, do according to this book. I hope, for the first 2 weeks, the relationship between CE and LegCo, I think, make some, contribution. I suggest that, Kerry might come, for question time, and CE also work out, well, should she be the first of the team to come to LegCo? Now, usually, if you look at the Q&A, usually were scheduled on a Thursday. So this time, I make arrangement that it's Wednesday, 9 o'clock. So she's the first one to come, and then she have the opportunities to tell our members that, she decided, how she would, improve the relation between executive and the legislature. And we also suggest that, she can either stand in front of me or next to me. So I think she picked the right position that I think even the press give, her choice good review. And then I also invite her for lunch to welcome her as new chief executive. And I think the results that a lot of members, even the Pan-Democrat, were happy to join. And I think you also can see the atmosphere at that lunch were, very, very good. I think we have 8 tables, a full house.
Mr. President, 2 questions, if I may. Now, regarding the disqualification case, you had a meeting internally, and you didn't discuss whether you're going to be suspending the enforcement of the court's verdict. Are you going to change your decision? Right, let me take your first question first. We didn't have any meeting yesterday. I was in LegCo presiding over the council meeting. Would you not implement the order? Well, I cannot choose to suspend the implementation of the court order, and this is impossible. What we have to do will depend on the court's verdict. If the verdict said that I have to do something and I don't, how can I challenge the court's decision? It is simple as that, in answer to your question. The gentleman's not speaking through. But I don't know what the court decision is. How can I make the application? Mr. President, Metro, also on the disqualification verdict, the Finance Committee will be in session when the verdict is handed down. If any member is unseated, can the Finance Committee proceed? Would they have to leave the chamber straight away? Now, you said that you have to wait until the court's decision before you consider the next step. But do you think that the Secretariat has a number of scenarios and approaches in response to the verdict? And how soon are you going to respond to the public about the way forward? Right, if any individual who is not a member, he or she cannot attend the council's meeting. As to whether there are different scenarios, of course, if they are members, I welcome them to continue in the meeting. If they're not LegCo members, they cannot attend the meetings, and we have to take some action to stop them attending the meetings. Now, that's the Finance Committee. The chairman is Mr. Chen Kin-po, and it is for the chairman to decide on the best course of action. Mr. President, will you please clarify this? Yesterday, you didn't allow the LegCo members to discuss the Liu Xiaobo case, and they stayed there in the council, and they said that you didn't give them all the considerations that you took into account when you took the decision. Did you consider the mainland authorities' perception? What factors did you take into account to not approve them? It was said that your predecessor, Mr. Zheng Yuxing, did approve some discussion of Zhao Lianhai, also in mainland issue. Well, I explained very clearly that I go by this book. I would not consider anybody else's perception. Would I consider the pro-establishment camp's perception or the Pandam's perception? If I have to consider all these, I cannot take any decision. So my ruling is on the basis of this book, and also on the basis of the advice of the Secretariat, whether it is in keeping with 16.2 of the ROP, whether it is allowable under that provision. As I said, if they raise the petition under 21, I would grant it. Now, you asked whether I would consider mainland authorities' perception. If I did, I probably wouldn't have approved it. So I think we have to make it clear that if it is in line with the rules of procedure, then approval would be granted. If it is not, if I am not satisfied that it is in line with the ROP, there will be no approval. So that's the fundamental rationale. For the previous practices, I've seen them, and every case is different in terms of rationale, so I cannot say why it was approved before and it isn't now. The Secretariat would dispense the same advice to my predecessor and also to me, and they are not giving their advice any differently. So I'll be making my ruling on the basis of this. Now, we are so concerned about the verdict. At the end of the day, there is a lack of trust between you and the Pan-Democrats. Now, how would you assess your relationship with the Democrats? What can you do to improve that? Also, Mr. Zheng Yuxing gave a written explanation. Would you, in taking a ruling, give more of an explanation? Well, all my rulings are in the public domain, and this has been the convention of LegCo, and I'm not going to deviate or depart from this practice. As I said, I'm going to have a written ruling. Now, I still haven't got time to get round to that, but I will do it. The President's ruling is handed down in a serious manner, and it is not a matter of personal preference. And I'm going to, well, we did discuss a lot of the issues before we gave the ruling. The lady is not speaking through. Well, it's not fair to say that it's hard to tackle the members. For ROP 16.2, if there is such a request, I have to look at it. and I have to look at what they are going to talk about. So it would take a bit of time there. I'm sure the presidents would face different challenges in different terms. Society is changing. The members are getting younger, and they may be more creative. And maybe I'm not as smart as my predecessors. So in dealing with anything, we have to tread carefully. Sometimes it would be far better to have an adjournment for the team to have some discussions before, rather than rushing into anything at all. Okay, thank you very much. Well, this is rather unfortunate, and this is not something we'd like to see happen. And I hope that his family members will come to terms with this. Thank you all very much.